Okay, good evening. Welcome to the February 8th Alameda County Water District Board meeting. Secretary, please call the roll.
Directors Huang. Here. Sethy.
Here.
Weed.
Here.
Akbari.
Here.
And Gunther.
Here. Will Director Weed this evening please lead us in the Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Okay. First item this evening will be public comments. We have a quick housekeeping from the manager.
Sure thing. Thank you, President Gunther. Welcome everybody. On behalf of the ACWD Board of Directors, I'd like to welcome the public's participation in this board meeting. My name is Ed Stevenson and I serve as the district's general manager. Members of the public may participate in this board meeting in person or remotely by either using the Zoom application or by telephone. Any member of the public present in person who wishes to make comments may approach the speaker's podium at the appropriate time. For those participating remotely, note that the meeting agenda, staff reports, and presentation materials for this meeting are all available on the district's website at acwd.org. You may reference the instructions at the top of the agenda for how to participate using the controls in the Zoom app or your dial pad if participating by telephone audio. Thank you again, everyone, for attending. And President Gunther, that completes my housekeeping remarks.
Moving on, then we'll go to public comments. Would anybody like to speak to the board on something that is not on the agenda this evening? If you're on Zoom and you'd like to, please raise your hand. Seeing none, move on to the consent calendar. Do any directors want to add or delete any items from the consent calendar?
I'll make the motion to add items 5.1, 5.2, and 5.3 to the consent calendar.
We have a motion to.
I'll second.
And we have a second to modify the consent calendar, 5.1, 5.2, and 5.3. Secretary, call the roll.
Directors Huang. Aye. Sethy.
Aye.
Weed.
Aye.
Akbari.
Aye.
And Gunther.
Aye. Motion to proceed consent calendar as amended.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Second. Secretary, call the roll, please.
Directors Huang. Aye. Sethy.
Aye.
Weed.
Aye.
Akbari.
Aye.
And Gunther.
Aye. Okay, item 5.4.
Yeah, so item 5.4 is a public hearing to consider revisions to the district's facilities connection charges, adoption of a resolution amending the district's rate and fee schedule regarding the facilities connection charges, and finding that the amendments are exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, and adoption of a resolution amending the policy for governing water services and extension and improvement of the water distribution system and facilities of the Alameda County Water District.
Okay. Understand we may have some members of the public trying to come for this item.
Yeah, we would expect that there may be some public comment for this item, and we do have the process here for a public hearing, and that would be the appropriate place to receive those
I'm wondering
comments.
if we should delay a little bit. Here, okay, very good. Okay, then let's go ahead with the item 5.4, the public hearing. So on behalf of the Board of Directors, I'd like to welcome the public's participation in this evening's public hearing. Public hearing will be on the proposed revisions to the district's facility connection charges, which are one-time fees paid by new or expanded connections to the water system. This agenda item also includes proposed revisions to the district's development policy. Although those revisions do not require a public hearing, the public is welcome to make comments on that aspect of the item during the public hearing. I'd like to review the ground rules for the public hearing process. I'll open the public hearing and the ACW staff will make a presentation. Presentation materials can be viewed through the online meeting or can be accessed through the district's website with the agenda and the materials for this meeting at www.acwd.org. Copies are also available on the table in the back of the boardroom. Upon conclusion of the presentation, the board and the ACW staff will receive public comments. The board and the staff will receive all comments without responding. On conclusion of the public comments, the board will request input from staff as appropriate to respond to questions and comments that were raised by the public, deliberate on the issue, and then close the public hearing. We do normally have a time limit of 5 minutes, possibly as low as 3, depending on the size of the audience, but it does look fairly light this evening. So for now, I'll be waiving the 5, or we'll shoot for something in that range. Speaker request. This hearing is being conducted in person, online, and by teleconference. For those attending in person who wish to make public comments, please complete and submit a speaker card to the district secretary, and you'll be called upon when the public comment period is open. Anyone attending virtually who would like to make public comments can do so by raising your hand in the Zoom app, submitting your comments or questions in the chat feature in Zoom, or by speaking up verbally when invited to do so. For those participating online that may not have a microphone on their computers, please dial in by phone. The numbers given on the agenda. Zoom allows you to use telephone dial pads #6 to unmute and mute, and #9 to raise, or excuse me, *6 to mute and unmute, and *9 to raise your hand. People participating by telephone will also be given opportunities to address the board directly. Please state your name and service address when making verbal comment. Providing the information is strictly voluntary. With that, I'm going to turn over to the general manager.
Great. And so officially, the public hearing is now open and staff will make a presentation. I do see that we have a hand up member of the public, Dennis Martin. And Dennis, I just want you to know we will definitely get to you shortly. We'll go through our procedure here. As required, this meeting has been properly noticed. In addition to mailing notice to the cities of Fremont, Newark, and Union City, and to developers, engineers, builders, subdividers that are all involved in ongoing, planned, or potential developments within the district service area. Notice was also published in multiple newspapers of general circulation in the district service area and also posted on the district's website. I'll now ask John Wunderlich, ACWD's Director of Finance and Administration, to lead us through the staff presentation covering what the board will be considering for adoption this evening. Because this is a formal public hearing, we ask that members of the public refrain from asking questions during the presentation, as there will be ample opportunity to ask questions and provide comments following staff's presentation. So, Mr. Wunderlich.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Good evening, board members, staff, and members of the public. If I could ask the district secretary to bring the presentation up. Staff did make a presentation back in December with the results of a draft report on our facilities connection charges. And so we are prepared this evening to present the final proposal. Rather than getting into a bunch of details now, we'll just begin working our way through the slides of the presentation. If we could go to the next slide. And so first we're going to cover the study itself, and we have Rick Simonson from HF&H Consultants here to present the results of the study. Next, staff will present some information about SB 330, which is a state law that does have some implications for our development fees. And so we'll go through what those are. We'll also briefly talk about the development policy updates. There are some minor changes to the existing district development policy that are proposed to align with state legal requirements, as well as to align with the proposed connection charges that are being reviewed this evening. And then we'll get into the staff recommendation and next steps. And so with that agenda overview, I will turn it over to Mr. Simonson to present the study results.
Wonderful. Good evening, board. Rick Simonson, Senior Vice President with HF&H Consultants. The district contracted with our firm to conduct the study that I'll go through. A bit of a summary. It's been a lot of detail provided in our final report. We'll first introduce what is a connection fee? What are those current connection charges? What is the approach of a nexus study to establish revisions to your current charges? What is the recommendation? First, the district's facilities connection charge is a connection fee that is a type of development impact fee that's authorized by the Mitigation Fee Act. Within the act, there's a specific code 66013 that states those fees or charges shall not exceed the estimated reasonable cost of providing service. So that's a foundation of conducting a nexus study. These are one-time charges at the time of development. It is not the ongoing water rates. It is a one-time charge. So we are tasked with setting the reasonable rates based on the nexus of the relationship between the new development and the impacts they have on the system. And that did require the nexus study that I'm summarizing here. Just a bit of background of what your current fees are. A connection charge, as I mentioned, is at the time of connection, and it differs between how it's assessed, depending on if it's a residential property or a non-residential property. All residential properties are charged based on a per dwelling unit charge, and they do differ between the type of residential property. Single families currently on the far right-hand side are charged a one-time fee of $9,928. Multifamily is they typically, on average, demand less of the systems, the water system. They charge something less than a single family, as well as a dormitory type property that uses less water and needs less of the systems, charged something even lower. Your current non-residential charges are based on the size of meter that's connected. You'll see that it does increase as the size of the meter increases, as the capacity of a meter, as it gets larger, demands again more capacity in the system. And you'll see, for example, a 5/8 inch meter is $9,928, the equivalent of a single family, and a 1 inch meter, as it provides 2.5 times as much capacity in the system that can flow through the meter. The charge is 2.5 times the $9,928.
Quick, two questions. How do we address ADUs with meters, and where it's required that we have a larger meter because of required fire suppression in a residential unit? Is there a waiver for the higher fee?
Yeah, maybe staff.
Yeah, so residential units are assessed by unit, not based on meter size. So if a single family home has its meter upsized for fire flows, that doesn't affect the fee because the fee is based on the dwelling unit. And then for accessory dwelling units, what the proposal is here, consistent with what was reviewed with the board back in December, is that an accessory dwelling unit would essentially be treated like a multifamily residential unit for assessing the fees. But that would only apply to an ADU that's a part of a new development. So we're not proposing this evening to create a new fee for an accessory dwelling unit that's added to an existing property. And that's far and away, probably 90% of the new ADUs that are built or added to an existing property. Staff does intend to take a look perhaps later this calendar year at what the feasibility could be to add a fee for that type of ADU and whether that would be appropriate or not. There are a number of legal considerations as well as rate setting considerations. And once we conclude that analysis, if we feel that it's appropriate to change the district's approach, we would bring a proposal back to the board at that time.
Thank you.
Thank you. When we conduct a Nexus study, there's 4 basic steps. First, we need to identify the facilities that will benefit growth or when they connect, then determine the value of those facilities, and then determine how much capacity those facilities will provide. And by dividing the value of those facilities in step 2 by the capacity that's provided by those facilities in step 3, you can calculate and determine the facilities connection charges that we're proposing here tonight. Just a quick background on the approach of valuing the system and the connection fees. We're governed by or follow the American Water Works Association M1 manual. It's an industry standard manual. There's 2 types of valuations. A buy-in method. This is typically used when the existing system has remaining capacity that can be provided for growth once they do connect, or an incremental cost approach where new facilities are necessary to accommodate that growth, or a combination of the 2. And you'll see in our analysis that we've gone with a combination of the 2. There are some existing facilities that still have capacity available for growth, and growth should pay the district for that capacity that's been maintained for them to connect, as well as future projects that will be necessary to accommodate the growth over the next 25 years. So just a little math exercise here. I'll hit some of the highlights with our buying component methodology. We start out with the value of the existing system. And you'll see that in the top row there of the first box, about $698 million. And that's arrived at by using the district's current fixed asset listing, which is an inventory of all the facilities that are providing service currently. And we do what we call a replacement cost new less depreciation calculation. So it's escalating up the cost of the facilities to today's dollars and subtracting depreciation for the wear and tear that's occurred since originally installed. We do know that there are some assets within the fixed asset listing that will not benefit growth. Typically, it is a smaller water lines that will only benefit typically a little suburb here and there throughout the city that growth does not need to make use of in order to connect. So that's the first row that we subtract about 64 million of such pipelines that will not benefit growth. In addition, the specific meters at your customer sites and the installation of those meters, of course, they only benefit that particular parcel, and growth should not share in those costs. We also subtract those about 27 million. And lastly, the district does have some outstanding debt. They've paid for some of the assets of the asset value of 698 million through bonds, and they're not fully paid off. So we make sure to subtract the outstanding debt. So when developers connect, they're not being double charged by paying a connection fee to pay off those debts, as well as once they connect, become rate payers, and their water bill includes the principal moving forward. So we do this to make sure we don't double dip on your developers. That's our numerator. And for the denominator, what's the capacity in the system that you currently have? We look at your current connections and develop an equivalent meter unit count. So it's based on a 5/8 inch meter and getting it into a uniform 5/8 inch meter by looking at your non-residentials. I mentioned there's various sizes of meters, and a 1 inch meter is the equivalent of 2.5 5/8 inch meters. So we take your total connections to derive an equivalent meter unit to have the same basis for all residents and businesses. Your current connections equate to 148,239 equivalent 5/8 inch meters. We divide that into the total net value of the system. We derive the buy-in component of 3,651. This is slightly less than your current buy-in component, which is $3,734. That's why you go through this process about every 5 years to refresh the numbers. Similarly, when we look at the incremental or the growth component for future assets over the next 25 years, working with the district staff, we value those projects that will occur over the next 25 years at $420 million. Similar to the buying component, there are some pieces that we subtract. The current balance in your fifth that you have already received some funds from development, and we want to make sure we subtract those again so we don't double count and charge more than once for the same costs. So that gives us a net incremental cost of $342 million. Using the same process and looking at growth over the next 25 years, we derive an equivalent meter unit again based on a 5/8 inch meter. We're looking for growth in customers over the next 25 years to equate to 45,576 equivalent 5/8 inch meters. And again, dividing that into the $342 million value, the incremental cost on an equivalent meter unit basis is the 7,506. So those are the two components from this point moving forward. So adding those together, we get the total 11,157 compared to the current 9,928, about a 12.4% increase from the current charges. And the charges will continue to be charged for residential based on a per dwelling unit basis, regardless of their meter sizes. The non-residential will be based on the particular meter size at each property. We're always asked, well, how do we compare with some of our neighbors? So with the current and proposed for the single family charge going from 9,009 up to the 11,100, staying in the same position amongst your neighbors, a little bit higher than SFPUC and MMWD, but remain lower than some very nearby jurisdictions of East Bay Mud, Contra Costa Water, and the Dublin San Ramon. Likewise, with the commercial, this is based on your most common connection for your commercial business, 2-inch meter, staying in the same position, lower than MMWD, East Bay Mud, Contra Costa, and Dublin San Ramon. With that, I'll stop if we'd like to continue or open it up for questions. I'll look to staff.
Question, we have almost $80,000 for 2-inch connection. Do we have any mechanism by which, much like Union Sanitary District, on their impact fees to allow people to pay it over a period of time?
So our current process, and I can ask Mr. Awoke to correct me if I have it wrong here, but I believe it is due in full at the time they want to pull the meter and have it installed so they can begin service.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
I would say if there are any additional questions for Mr. Simonson related to his aspect of the presentation, now would be a good time to take those, and then we'll turn it over to Mr. Aum to walk us through the remaining slides.
I have none.
Okay, then we'll turn it over to Mr. Aum.
And again, Mr. Martin, we will definitely call on you once our presentations are complete.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bonalik. Thank you, Mr. Simonson. Good evening, board members and member of the public on Zoom and staff. So for this part of the presentation, I will cover a little bit more in detail on SB 330 because this, Mr. Bonalik said there's implication to the proposed FCC. We touched on this, we reviewed with the board in December, but we wanted to get into a little bit more detail in terms of how it impact the proposed FCC. Give an example of a phase in of the FCC. I will also review our proposal, how we want to include the SB 330 FCC on our rates and fee schedule. So there are different sections in the rate and fee schedule that's reflected on in the board resolution. We'll touch a little bit on development policy update, and then we'll end with a staff recommendation and next steps. So on the SB 330 impact on FCC, again, we discussed this. So this was passed into law in October 2019. We believe it became effective right away. So what this SB 330 did was it locked the FCC at the time that the application was deemed complete by the Tri-City. So if it was deemed complete in 2020, it locked the FCC at that time. But SB 330 allows for the annual inflationary adjustment. So that's allowed under SB 330. Not every project qualifies under SB 330. So on the slide here, there's three types of development: residential only, project that create two or more new dwelling units, that qualifies. Mixed use development consisting of both residential and non-residential has to have at least 2/3 of the square footage designated for residential use. Transitional housing and supporting housing also qualifies under SB 330. So I mentioned rate and fee schedule. So since there's an implication of SB 330 on a proposed FCC, the top section of this fees or FCC are for SB 330 projects with application completed prior to the effective date, each of the column. As an example, a single family home qualified under SB 330 had the application deemed complete prior to May 1 of 2020. The applicant would come in now. The effective May 1, 2024 fee, the district would charge $8,956. So $8,956 instead of the proposed effective May 1, 2024 for a non-SB 330 projects or SB project that's deemed complete after May 1. The proposed fees is $11,157. Just give another example. If the application was deemed complete prior to May 1, 2024, so just now deemed complete, comes in and pay the FCC, that FCC would be $9,759. So again, it locks the FCC. For this reason, staff is proposing to include this again for single family, multifamily, and all the non-residential, dormitory, et cetera, in the updated rate and fee schedule as reflected in the board resolution. Just briefly on the FCC for the non-SB 330 projects, and as well as the SB 330 projects with application completed on or after May 1st, when the proposed fees become effective, they would pay the proposed FCC, and this is for single family. So there's a discussion on a phase in. So we staff just want to provide an example of what a 5-year phase in would look like. So when the district the last time we did a study was in 2019. The district added the equity buy-in component to the FCC, so that was new, and the district implemented a 5-year phase in. But that's only for the equity buy-in portion. It was new. This time the HF&H was updating, not changing the methodology, still keeping the incremental component as well as the equity buy-in component. So if we were to implement a 5-year phase-in, this is what would look like. The proposed effective May 1, 2024 FCC for single family is $11,157. Phase-in over a 5-year period, that would be the phase-in amount. Note that these fees would still be updated annually for inflation adjustment.
Mr. Ron,
Yes.
I don't understand the slide because I see 11,157 as the baseline. Why are the numbers not going up after that with each periodic date?
It is going up. So it's this assume a 5-year phase in. So the first of the 5 years, 10,174. The next year is 10,420, and so on to the 5th year is 11,157. So the increased amount is spread over 5 years. Again, this is just an example.
Yeah, so the number on the far left is just kind of the baseline staff proposal with no phase in. And then as you progress along, it would be if we were to do a phase in, this is kind of how much it would go up instead of all going up at once.
Okay, I see. So we're being given a choice here? Oh.
Staff's proposal is not to do a phase in, and we'll get into more of those details, but obviously the decision is up to the board, how you would like to proceed.
So, so we'll come back to this slide when we talked about how the phase in and how that impacts the SB 330. So I'll provide a few examples in the later slide on that. So this is, staff's not recommending a phase in. We believe that the increase is relatively modest relative to the home values in the service area. And as you saw earlier, fees still being less or lower compared to the East Bay agencies, much lower in some cases or compared to other agencies. And SB 330, as I mentioned earlier, locks the FCC at the time that the applications are deemed complete. So that already provides protection for increases for, like I said, many developments that I mentioned earlier.
Let me suggest that something that would help us with a frame of reference is provide the total amount of funds that this will generate. For example, look at the number of units, single family units that were built the past 12 months. We're looking at this, what would be the difference, additional monies coming into the year. It strikes me they're doing relatively few single family residents in our service area currently. Multifamily will be a bigger and more significant element, but at least to give us some feel for what we're approving when it comes to the actual dollar amounts.
So that's all factored into the equivalent meter unit that Mr. Simonson addressed earlier. That is part of the growth projection. And that's the data that's used to conduct the study. And we also provided that.
But quantifying that for the dollar amounts, we have a growth projection, but to quantify how much money we're actually talking about generating for the district this coming year, should we approve the rate increases?
Yeah, so I think I can take that. I've just brought up our most recent monthly budget report on my screen. And the district budget for the current fiscal year for facilities connection charges is a total of approximately 6.7 million of revenue. And so far through the first half of the fiscal year, we've collected about 2.9 million in revenue. And so if you're looking at an annual budget of 6.7 million, we're looking at a little over a 10% increase. So that would increase revenues maybe 700,000 per year to the district based on the proposed increases. But it does fluctuate from year to year. We have had years recently where we've been at about 10 to 12 million in connection charge revenues. We've had years that were less. So over the past 5 years, on average, it's been about 10 million per year, but it's a little lower this year.
And the ratio of multifamily to single family?
So what we've observed over the last 3 or 4 years is that about 83% of new residential units have been multifamily and only about 17% have been single family. And we expect as we progress into the future, that number that's multifamily is going to get even higher and start getting closer to 90, 95, and even, close to 100% in the future.
And you look at the comparative value cost per unit.
Yeah, that's all factored into the projections and the recommended fee amounts.
Okay, so then 17%, you're out of 6 of this, so a couple 100,000 comes out of the single family residence, and the rest of it's multifamily.
Yeah, well, there's also some commercial in there.
And the commercial, so
Yeah.
$100,000 is what we're really speaking of then, possibly in the single family residence area. The net.
Yeah, probably would be somewhere in that region.
Okay, good. It's helpful for me to have some sense when I throw out unit cost, what is the total dollar?
Yeah, so that would be the about 100,000 for single family would be kind of the upper bound. It would really be less based on how much was residential compared to commercial.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I will go to the next slide. So this slide really addressed the last point that SB 330 protects, already protects FCC increases. This just giving an example. So in SB 330 projects with application complete prior to May 1st, 2024, that's the proposed effective date, are unaffected by the phase in we saw earlier. So it locks the FCC prior to May 1st, so that any future phase in won't be impacted on SB 330. Bullet point B there, just to give an example. SB 330 projects with application complete April 1, 2023. So there's ready to install April 1st, 2025. So they completed before the effective date, but come in and pay the fee after the proposed effective date to pay the FCC of $9,559. Now that's, we saw that earlier on the slide. It locks at the effective May 1st, 2023 date. So just prior to that, the application being complete, so that's what they pay. They would pay compared to the FCC for the non-SB 330, 11,156. So that's about 1,600 less. So again, that's to the point that SB 330 protects the applicants from the proposed increase. If the applicant does not pay until wait another year, that applicant would pay the cost of the $9,559. Again, that's the lock, FCC plus the 1 year inflationary adjustment that's allowed under SB 330. So this next slide, there's a lot of text, but this want to provide an example again of the phase in of the FCC. So SB 330 bullet point C there, an example of project with completion, application deemed complete May 1st, 2024. That's coming up. That's complete, ready to install meter and pay FCC before the following year. Would pay the current, the proposed FCC effective May 1st, 2024, 11,157. So pay a year later, pay the 11,157 May 1st effective proposed FCC. The applicant not ready until the following May 1st, 2025. Pay an FCC of the 11,157 plus the annual, the 1 year inflationary adjustment.
I'm
Yes.
still trying to get some clarity here. What is the inflation factor if we impose the fee of 11,157?
So it would be based on ENR CCI Internet News Record Construction Cost Index from July 1st to from July to July. So we don't know what that is yet, but whatever that inflationary will be for the following. That would be applied to the 11,157.
Until the project is completed?
Until they come in to pay the FCC. The application deemed complete, it locks the FCC 11,157. They come in the 1 year after that, they would pay that plus the 1 year inflation. They come in 2 years, we would pay the inflation for the
Got it.
2 year inflation.
Okay, got it.
Bullet point D, SB 330 project with application deemed complete in April 2025 with a phase-in proposed FCC would pay the 10,174. That's showed earlier, the first year of the phase-in. That what it would be if we phased it in over 5 years instead of the 11,157. And then until the FCC is paid, so that plus inflation, they will pay the first year of the phase in. But it takes, or Development Services has confirmed that it's normal that a project could take 2 to 3 years. So if the application or the applicant comes in, pay that 2 to 3 years later, they wouldn't be paying the second year of the phase in. It'd be there would be fees would be frozen at the 1 year, the first year of the phase in. So the following phase in that I showed earlier, it going up, they wouldn't be affected by that. So again, SB 330 protects them from the increases. So it feels like they get advantage or they already benefited just from the SB 330 already. So with the phase in, that's another benefit that we felt that the phase in is not recommended. Okay, that's about SB 330 implication to FCC. Want to highlight our engagement with BIA. We've been staff have been engaged with BIA from the very beginning, as you heard from BIA. Staff have several meetings with BIA and their rate consultant, development and financial advisory. Staff and our consultant HF&H also met with BIA and DFA. So there's several meetings that took place after the December or at the December meeting. BIA provided comments, feedback to us, and one of the comment was on the growth projection. So staff went back and relooked at our growth projection, the multifamily and single family that Director Reed was just talking about. Based on their DFA and BIA feedback, the final report, the final number that you saw this evening is about 1.5% lower than what you saw in December because of the engagement with BIA and their consultant. Just quickly, we mentioned development policy update. So in the resolution, there's a separate resolution for your consideration this evening. So we need to update the development policy, as you heard earlier, to reflect change in statutes, regulations, and current best practice, and also to align with the proposed changes to our rate and fee schedule. So there's a resolution and a recommendation for you this evening to update that. So with that, I'll go to staff recommendation for this item. The board to conduct a public hearing, adopt resolution to amend our district rate and fee schedule for the FCC, and then the adopt resolution amending the development policy. As for next steps, after tonight, if the board approves the proposed changes to the facility connection charges, the fees would go into effect on May 1st, 2024. By law, it cannot be effective sooner than 60 days. So that's the effective date after approval. Staff will bring back the annual inflationary adjustment as part of our annual update to the FCC, depending on, as we mentioned, the July to July change in the construction cost index. And that concludes staff presentation, and we're happy to answer any more questions you may have.
President Gunther, do we need to go to the hand that's up here?
We'll go there first. Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll now, staff presentations concluded, and we're going to open up the public hearing. Correct. So
The public comment portion
the
of the hearing.
public
Yep.
comment portion of the public hearing. Okay, so Mr. Dennis, you've had your hand up. We will start with you. So anyone, but before that, anyone who'd like to make public comments could do so by submitting a speaker card, raising your hand in the Zoom app, submitting your comments or questions into the chat feature in Zoom, or by speaking up verbally when invited to do so. As a reminder, normally we would use a 5-minute comment period. I'm Mr. Dennis. I'm going to waive that for you this evening. But I'd ask you to kind of, if you can, hold within that general vicinity of that if possible. But it is waived. We ask that if you state your name, service address, or affiliation when making your comments, but that's optional. And accordingly, will the district secretary please unmute the meeting participants so that they make their public comments. Mr. Dennis. Mr. Martin.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. Good evening, and thank you for taking my comments tonight. Dennis Martin speaking on behalf of BIA Bay Area. And tonight, as you consider raising connection fees on new single-family homes and apartments, I ask that you keep several points in mind. And I call your attention to the peer review that BIA commissioned from Development and Financial Advisors and the BIA comment letter, both submitted earlier this week. First, let me say that ACWD and BIA have cultivated a cooperative relationship dating back about 8 years when we first began working together on project approval processes, infrastructure installations, and staffing levels. BIA has greatly appreciated the level of transparency and communication that ACWD staff has exemplified, from Ed Stevenson through Jonathan Wunderlich and through the rest of the staff there at the district. I wish all jurisdictions were this good to work with. Through the years, ACWD has understood the need for housing of all types and been sensitive to the need for the development of that housing at all income levels. Just to keep in mind, Alameda County is slated to continue to be a focal point for housing growth in the coming years, with about 21% of all Bay Area housing growth and nearly 90,000 units in the next 8-year housing element cycle located in Alameda County. And a substantial portion of those units will be in ACWD jurisdiction. Now, many of those units, in fact, over 50%, are slated to be affordable to moderate, low, and very low income households. So there's some interesting challenges coming up in the region for housing. During the previous connection charge study and fee adoption, the district wisely moderated fee levels, as was discussed earlier by staff, by phasing in fee increases over the 5-year period covered by the study. With annual phase-in and added inflation adjustments, the district kind of smoothed over the bumps and jumps of the fee, and we enjoyed a pretty steady, dependable, predictable connection fee during a fairly robust housing industry period, and you allowed us to grow along with your fees. Now, we're in a bit of a different situation. Housing growth has definitely slowed. Many projects, especially multifamily projects, are stalled, and there's no clear crystal ball here on when this is going to change. Construction costs, which skyrocketed over recent years, fell back in 2023 into negative inflation territory, and some jurisdictions are recognizing this and taking appropriate steps. In fact, the city of Fremont, for instance, just reduced fees by 1.73% to align with the ENR-CCI inflation index that was produced at the end of 2023. We think ACWD should do the same now. BIA does raise several questions and concerns in our peer review that we have submitted to you. One of the main concerns in our peer review is the significantly higher growth-related capital improvement costs when compared to previous estimates in 2018. And we brought this up to staff during our meetings. And I think that we just want to get on the record there that we do have a concern that the growth-related capital improvement costs have significantly increased since 2018. One factor that may be driving those connection fee costs is that the study may have been relying on data for construction costs based on high inflationary years from about 2020 through 2023. And we respectfully ask the board to recognize this and consider reducing the initial fee for residential development by that 1.73%, recognizing that the current inflationary factor has gone negative in the cost of construction. And you were speaking earlier about the comparison with other water jurisdictions. I just wanted to I'm not quite sure about the slide that shows other jurisdictions' fee levels, because when I read the DSRSD capacity fee, I'm looking at a 5/8-inch meter, and the fee level is $15,500, not $35,000. Of course, there's, DSRSD is split up into many different geographical areas. And I'm talking mostly Dublin and San Ramon. And for that 5/8" meter, which is the equivalent of a single family dwelling unit. To conclude, I'm just going to say that housing is still in short supply. Rents continue to rise due to high demand, but construction has really slowed to a crawl due to economic conditions that we know about, but are beyond your control and our control. And we recognize that, we understand that, but we ask that the board to take into consideration these factors as you deliberate your decision on fee increases when the economics do turn around for housing. I think we'll see a robust return to development. But for now, we don't know exactly where we're going to go. So appreciate your taking our comments. I'm here online if you have any questions about our submittals or anything else that comes to mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just mention, just for the record, Mr. Martin, the BIA of the Bay Area, did submit the report that he referenced. It came together with a transmittal letter that was previously posted to our website, and copies were provided to the board of directors. And then also, as Mr. Martin described, there was a follow-up letter was received yesterday with some additional comments that Mr. Martin covered this evening. That also was posted to our website and provided to the board.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Martin. There are no attendees in our audience here. We do have, looking again, maybe not.
Yeah, this just to make sure if there are some other attendees from the boardroom, they look like members of staff. But certainly if there's any other attendee online, please raise your hand and if you have any comments, questions, or remarks.
Seeing no more hands, then no more speakers and no more comments. We'll shift now to board questions. Does
Yeah,
the
maybe
director
just
have
one, I'm
questions?
sorry to interrupt, just one quick check to our district secretary to confirm that there was no other questions or commentary that we've received in any other means.
No, there are no other comments that have been received.
Thank you.
There are no further comments. We've done a secondary check. So now, do any of the directors, let's start up with our deliberation. Any director have any questions to staff, general counsel based on the questions or comments presented by the public? And if you'd like to start with Director Sethy.
I don't have any questions, but I have comments.
You can go ahead.
Okay. So, I've been a longtime member of the Fremont Chamber of Commerce, and for at least, I think 14 years, going on 15, a member of the Government Affairs Committee, where we do have a lot of interaction with the building trades groups and developers that participate in that focus group. And we stay right on top of what the city of Fremont is doing with regular interaction with the city planning folks, the economic development folks. So we're really tuned into development. And I'm speaking specifically about the city of Fremont, not Newark and Union City. So I'm very acquainted with the challenges that people are having in the construction and housing industry, even going over to commercial and industrial properties, especially when interest rates are high and trying to get any construction loan financing at this time is, very expensive, sometimes prohibitively. So I am I just want to express I'm sympathetic with where the city of Fremont went, the city council, in trying to accommodate the interests in our community, because we do need a lot more housing. We need to make it as affordable as possible for people who have the desire to do development to be able to get in at an affordable rate in the market to build what we need. I'm going to have some comments under director's comments later on similar subject. But I would actually favor a phase-in approach, which is about $1,000 less on the initial charge. That more than absorbs the reduction that the city of Fremont made under 2%. And I think that that provides people with a little bit of a time horizon to build in the expected costs they're going to have to pay for. Ultimately, they're not really paying the fee plus inflation until not at the time of application, but when they've completed their project. So although the staff is proposing that we go forward with a certain rate increase right now, effective May 1, I would be supportive of going with the alternative that you offered the board here. So those are my thoughts.
Director Weed?
Sorry, just thought staff might respond to the question about the small reduction in sort of negative escalation that Mr. Martin referenced. Just want to make sure the board understands how that was addressed in the proposal that staff is making this evening.
Yes, so that negative inflation is reflected in staff's presentation this evening. And so it's reflected in a couple of different ways. One, for any project with its application deemed complete by April 30th of 2024, it will not be subject to the fees that are proposed to go into effect starting May 1st. And it will be subject to the current fees that are currently adopted by the board. And we are applying that negative 1.7 inflationary adjustment to those proposed fees. So actually for any project with its application already complete, they are getting a proposed 1.7% reduction based on that negative inflation. So that's fully incorporated for those projects. For the proposed fees that would only apply to projects that complete their application on or after May 1st. So these are projects that are not yet developed yet. There's the two components of the fee. There's the equity buy-in component and then the incremental component. And so as Mr. Simonson reviewed with how the equity buy-in component is done, is you escalate the value of the existing system into today's dollars. The endpoint of that escalation was June of 2023, and that negative 1.7% happened from July of 22 to July of 23. So that negative 1.7% is actually reflected within the system value utilized to calculate the buy-in component. So it's actually already there. The incremental component is based on the costs allocated to growth within our capital improvement program, which was last updated in the spring, comprehensively updated in the spring of 2023, kind of toward the end of the period of that negative inflation, based on staff's, kind of best estimate of the cost of those projects. So we do feel that negative 1.7% actually is already largely reflected within the proposal. Now, it's still an increase in the total, largely driven by the incremental component, because over the last 5 years, the total CIP of the district has more than doubled. And so commensurate with that, the costs allocated to growth have also grown by similar amounts. And so that's why you're seeing the growth on that side, much of which is driven by our long-term projections for our main renewal and replacement program. And so that's kind of what's going on there. But to address that comment, yes, that's.
So, Mr. Wunderlich and the rest of the folks here, what I was trying to say is I'd like us to be consistent with at least the city of Fremont and what they did. And I read through all your background materials, so I understand what you factored in. I don't know what's really going on in Union City or Newark per se, but what I am suggesting here is that we actually offer more accommodation on top of that.
Correct. So I
Just
wasn't.
with, that I'm encouraging us to take a strong look at the lower starting dollar amount and then let that phase in over time. We're still going to get the money that we need for future growth. So the district is not really incurring any great harm from my perspective.
Yeah, I wasn't intending to comment on your suggestion to do a phase-in. I was just trying to clarify that the negative inflation is factored within the staff proposal.
I got it.
Yeah.
But wait,
Okay, first of all, the total dollar amounts we're talking about are marginal. We have a budget that approaching $200 million a year. Just in an earlier conversation, we discussed the $100,000 net for single family residents and the issues we have before us. So from the district standpoint, we have some flexibility without impacting our overall operations. I find it curious that there's no indexing on the fees for single family residents. We talk about affordable housing. We charge the same for an affordable housing unit as we do for a market rate unit. From our standpoint, we have ratepayers, not taxpayers, funding our operation. Developers are developers and they have certain fixed costs. But if we were to go into and it's beyond the scope of tonight's hearing to get into details on the philosophy and how to allocate funding. So I would just generally introduce those concepts in our overall discussions. The second element, when we talk about growth related fees, our major costs are coming in major water projects that we're signing up for. $100 million for Los Vaqueros. Hetch potential, another multi-billion-dollar improvement. And our share of that will be 4%. The Delta Tunnel, 20 billion, of which we have a little over 1%. So that is where your real costs are. And one of my pet peeves has been we have a reservoir which is built, plumbed, and paid for with 50,000 acre feet of unused manageable storage in Del Val. And we'll spend $1 billion as a system to replicate something that's already in place. And we have not pursued it with vigor, which we should. And East Bay Regional Park District is now actively negotiating for the extension of their 50-year lease. So hopefully we can recognize that when we throw out these multi-billion-dollar projects that we're involved with, these are the people that are going to pay for it, but their growth impact fees. Thank you.
If I could just quickly clarify on that. So the growth is what's within our capital improvement program. When we make payments to San Francisco and the state of California for our participation in their programs, those are operating expenses of the district. And these impact fees on new connections do not contribute to those operating expenses.
The Los Vaqueros will be a capital improvement.
Yeah, so there's the potential for Los Vaqueros to be a capital improvement and for a share here because we would potentially have some actual ownership stake. But for the San Francisco system and the state system, there's no allocation.
And Del Val would be nominal. So, all right, thank you.
Director Akbari.
So I'll just start by saying that I'm supportive of staff's recommendation. And I will say I do appreciate the comments from BIA. I appreciated the letters that Mr. Martin sent in and definitely took all of that into account. I think we're still comparatively, it's a very modest fee compared to other agencies around us. And I think from an equity perspective, we have enough to back up, justify our facilities charges. I think it's fair. I do understand that it's, you know, from a builder's perspective, when everything is getting more expensive, you don't want to hear about another line item that's going to be increasing. I definitely understand the BIA's perspective there. But I still think even given the total cost of construction, this is still a relatively modest fee. And so I think justifiable. So that's my comment. Thank you.
If a quick follow-up on that, on the Delta tunnel, since there was a court decision that we cannot utilize the state water tax on the property tax bill for payments, whether that would also still qualify as operating monies as opposed to capital improvement monies.
Yes.
So not only a legal opinion.
Yeah, so the means of collecting it, whether it's through a property tax or a water rate, does not affect whether the cost is categorized as an operating expense or capital expense of the district. And because the state of California Department of Water Resources is the one that owns the asset and not the district, it's not something that we can consider a capital cost.
Even if we upfront the construction out of our own budget.
Right, because we're not directly paying the construction, we are paying our required statement of charges to the state of California. And then they use that money to pay for the construction. And so it's generally considered an operating expense for an agency when you make a payment to a third party.
Thank you.
If I may offer a slight rebuttal to Director Akbari's comments. I fully support your comments about how the numbers were derived and our consultants and financial staff. I have no dispute that you've come up with correct information. However, the board is a policy-making board, and it needs to reflect the needs of our community. And right now, we are in a massive housing crunch in California. 65 new housing laws were passed in the last legislative cycle. And it's mind-boggling what not only planning commissions, city councils, and developers have to go through at this time where interest rates are sky high. So from a policy perspective, I'm suggesting that this board needs to better meet the needs of our community. And let's demonstrate it here with the building trades folks and developers and with our other government agencies that we work with in the area, the 3 cities that we support. Let's get real about this.
Director Huang.
All right, so I'm just gonna say that I actually support and echo Director Akbari's comments. Director Sethy, I definitely hear what you're saying and sympathize with the building industry. But I think staff was really clear that they actually made accommodation in their calculation to account for City of Fremont's negative number, and that we are actually consistent with the city's operation and process. I think no matter how you look at it, I understand your discussion about this is a small amount of money for the district, but this money has to come from somewhere if we make that accommodation. This is a zero-sum game. Somebody has to pay for it. If it's not the building industry, at some point, someone else has to pay for it, or customers has to pay for it. looking at the comparison chart, even if the Dublin San Ramon number is wrong and is at $17,000, that still put the district in the same spot, right in the middle. So I think we're positioned quite well. So I will definitely be supporting staff recommendation. However, I do want to express my appreciation for BIA. Thank you for your active and continuing participation, working with our staff to come up with a realistic and I would say reasonable number. I understand you probably would disagree with that, but we do really appreciate your continuing participation and working with our staff. And thank you for taking the time, Mr. Martin, tonight to come talk to us.
If I may just clarify regarding the DSRSD number in our survey, when you want to connect to the system within their service district, you pay a fee both to Dublin San Ramon Services District as your retail provider, and you also pay a fee to Zone 7, the wholesale provider. And the numbers presented in staff's comparison are the total amount of connection fees you pay to connect. So the Dublin San Ramon one would be solely just their piece would be less than what's shown. But again, we're showing the full amount of the fee to connect.
So by summing the two, you basically doing it apples to apples
Correct.
comparison
Because
this is
somebody that,
actually how much you have to pay
yeah,
to connect your house.
exactly. And somebody who's connecting in our service area is only paying a fee to us for their water connection. They're not also paying some separate agency.
Thank you.
Well, I'm hearing two things this evening. So I've heard Director Sethy's comments and concerns, and I do agree with him in that the present state of the industry is difficult. The interest rates are high, in fact, they're very dramatically high. It's quite difficult probably to build. Some of the state laws make it difficult, some of them make it actually rather easy, depending on where you are. I think most of that though reflects ADU and not development in general as a units development. In fact, those are probably more difficult because they're percentages, et cetera. However, my concerns is that if we take it money from there, it's likely gonna have to take it somewhere else. And that would come now into our rates to the rest of the remaining people that are here. So based on that, I would side with staff recommendation. I don't see it as a huge difference. Obviously, I'm not the one with the BIA trying to build the project. Significantly large project, it's a big number. Does it affect affordability? Yes. But there are far more factors, I think, at play in this than that. So I think we have two ways to go forward. Looks like at least three of us support staff recommendation. However, Director Sethy would like to support the other one. So I'll look for a motion. Let's suggest that somebody would like to make a motion at this point. We'll see if we can get a second and we'll move from there.
If I may, I could just sort of, again, sort of formally confirm that
that's right.
the
We have to
public
close
hearing
it
is.
first.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, first we have to close the public hearing, sorry. And so with that, I'm going to declare the public hearing closed. And we'll now move forward with motions on a staff recommendation or the motion with Director Sethy's. I'd be requesting a motion from the board.
Well, let me put forward a test motion, if I may, that we support the phase-in approach with approximately $1,000 lower starting point, and use that as our methodology for moving forward. I'm not sure exactly on.
I'll second that motion to put it on the table.
Okay, and that was, I believe that was in the staff recommendation. The phased in approach is in the staff presentation.
It's in the presentation
Not in the
as an
recommendation,
example, right?
yes.
Because it was discussed at the prior meeting. Staff's recommendation, I'll read the actual recommendation and then we'll clarify as needed to make sure that we're all on the same page. So staff's recommendation is by motion, adopt a resolution amending the district's rate and fee schedule and finding that all the amendments are exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, and by motion, adopt a resolution amending the district's policy governing water services and the extension and improvement of the water distribution system and facilities of the Alameda County Water District. So staff's actual recommendation as presented did not include the phasing component, but again, the board could make the motion, the motion's been made.
Well, I support those recommendations from staff with the caveat that we use a different starting point with phase in.
With the phased in.
Why don't we just start with the motion and the second that was made, and it's not included in any of the staff recommendation, which is to have a 5-year phase in shown on page 16 of the presentation. And if that passes, then we'll figure out what to do next.
Okay. Try that. And Director Sethy, are
We
you
have
good
a
with that?
motion and a second,
And
so
then Director Weed, you're good with that? On your second? Let's go
Yeah,
ahead.
I'm fine. It's support.
Okay. We have a motion and a second regarding the phased in approach, page 16. And further comments? Don't see. Then we'll go ahead and we'll draw a vote on that. Secretary, call the roll.
Okay, Directors Huang? No. Sethy?
I,
Weed?
Aye.
Akbari?
No.
And Gunther?
No, I'll support so no. We have a motion.
So that motion failed by a 3-2 vote.
Okay, then let's see if we get the motion for the existing staff recommendation based on the evening's presentation.
I'll make the motion to adopt staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Further comments? Secretary, please.
Directors Huang? Aye. Sethy?
abstain.
Weed?
Aye.
And Akbari?
Aye.
And Gunther?
Aye.
And just to clarify that that motion included both resolutions. One was to adopt the rate and fee schedule and finding the amendments exempt from CEQA, and the other one was the resolution amendment policy governing water service and extension improvement, just for the record. And that did pass by 4 to 0 to 1 vote, with the 1 vote being an abstention by Director Sethy.
Item 5.4. Moving on to 5.5.
Yes, 5.5, and I will just again repeat what I heard from members of our board, that we appreciate the Building Industry Association and Dennis for your participation in our process and all the work that we've done together over the years. So thank you, and thanks for joining us. Yeah, item 5.5 is resolution approving revised miscellaneous fees and charges and updating the district's rate and fee schedule and finding that the amendments are exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. And to get us going on this item, I will turn it over to Mr. Wunderlich.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. The district annually conducts a review of various fees and charges and revises them as appropriate to cover the costs of providing the service for which the fee or charge is imposed. As a result of this review, staff recommends revisions to various fees and charges. The proposed changes were reviewed at the December 12th, 2023 Finance and Administration Committee meeting. And this report will be supplemented by a staff presentation. So I'll ask Mr. Aum to step up to the lectern and for the district secretary to bring up the presentation. And just quickly before I turn it over to Mr. Aum, any fee not presented this evening, if it's not presented, it means we're not proposing any change to it. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Aum.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wunderlich. So I'll jump right to it. So this is an annual process, an annual update, looking at our rate and fee schedule, looking at individual fees and charges, use our actual data from the prior fiscal year, which in this case, fiscal 22-23, and update, do the calculation and update the fees as appropriate. Because the fees and charges has to recover the cost. In some cases, the district decide not to recover the full cost. For some fees and charges. So again, what you see here on this in the presentation, the one we're proposed updating, what's not here is not being proposed changes. Just a handful of changes. The first set of changes. So normally we updated these every year based on just the cost of material, whether it's the cost of the meter, the device in this case. The first fee is the meter jumper assembly charge. The deposit amount is proposed to go up about 10%. Again, this is to because the cost of the meter went up. The monthly rental is proposed to go up about $41. So this is really to looking at the roughly a 50% full replacement cost. So again, as I mentioned, the district doesn't need to recover the 100%. So the proposed change is 10% for the deposit amount. Again, they don't have to pay it; they return the equipment, and the monthly rental fee is supposed to go up $41. The hydrant flow test charge, again, that is an 80% recovery. So going up from $247 to $251. Again, we use actual data, staff time, material. So do calculation for each of these. The fire hydrant meter charge, very minimal, a small increase there. There's a decrease to the fee, that's the electric vehicle charging fees. Again, we're not charging for the maintenance, staff does the maintenance, so this is to recover the electricity costs, the software, as well as the billing fee. So we're using outside a third-party vendor to process the payment for us. So it's the proposed charge is 43 cents currently, decreased to 41 cents per kilowatt hour per station. So the next set of fee, this slide, the following slide, are for our well ordinance from our water resources program. The proposed changes between 8% to 12%, depending on the fees. So they have not been adjusted since 2018. So it's been a while because the recovery had been good. We're recovering what the district need to recover. So this time, the staff did an annual evaluation, determined that it is appropriate to propose about 8% change to the fees and charges related to wells. The other set of fees and charges related to other excavations, and then as well as the exploratory holes and vapor wells. This does not include administrative staff time. That's different. So this is really field staff that goes out there and has to perform the actual work. So that's the proposed for you this evening. Like I said, just a handful of changes to make sure that we're up to date on our fees and charges in the rate and fee schedule. Staff recommendation is to adopt a resolution approving the amendment to the district rate and fee schedule with the proposed changes that I went over this evening.
Director's comments, Director Sethy, like to start?
I'll move the staff recommendation on.
A second, I have a question.
Wait, seconds with a question.
Question, where you had blanks on the actual revenues generated by some of these fees, is that because they're really things we don't do on a regular basis?
That's correct. It went into the miscellaneous fees account, so it's irregular. So there's no some years more, some years less, but it takes it's coded in our accounting system as a miscellaneous revenue because it's small amount.
Okay, I appreciate the fact that it came out of other earlier presentations, that you have a column on the revenues when we do increment these rates and changing of individual costs. I encourage you to use the last year's budget, last year's experience or something of approximately how much money we're really talking about. And in most cases, I think it'll be nominal, and that's hopeful in making an informed decision.
Noted, and that will do
Thank you.
that.
So we have a motion by Director Sethy to move it. Public comments? Yeah, Mr. Nishimaru's raised his hand. Ed?
Okay, thank you, President Gunther. Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick comment on the EV fee. I'm glad to see that the district lowered the fee by 2 cents a kilowatt hour. But I think I mentioned this at the exact same hearing discussion last year. The price that I see is still substantially above the marketplace, even when comparing against similar, public institutions such as Union Sanitaries, the City of Fremont, Newark Unified School District. And it's, more than double the cost of electricity, as was discussed in yesterday's Engineering and IT committee meeting. So I, again, encourage the district to examine why the fee that you need to charge to recover the costs are substantially higher than those of your comparable sister agencies. Thank you.
I'd be happy to offer some comments. So the cost that we're charging actually is not even full cost recovery for the district. Because in addition to the cost of the electricity, there's also the costs of payment processing, as well as kind of an annual maintenance fee to maintain the facility, where we recover just a portion of those costs amortized across expected utilization. And so we've got more than just the electricity to consider.
I do see Mr. Nishimura's hand still up. I don't know if you had a follow-up comment, Mr. Nishimura.
No, my fault for not lowering it. Thank you.
No problem.
No further public comments? Then we have the motion. Do we have a second?
Yes, sir.
We do have a second motion. Further comments, Secretary Caldwell?
Directors Huang,
Aye.
Sethy,
Aye.
Weed,
All right.
Akbari,
Aye.
and Gunther.
Aye. Okay, moving on, item 5.6.
All right, item 5.6 is delivery of our groundwater monitoring report and survey report and adoption of resolutions relating to the Replenishment Assessment Act. And I will turn it over to Ms. Heides, our Director of Water Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. As required by the Replenishment Assessment Act of the Alameda County Water District, the district must prepare an engineering survey and report on groundwater conditions, commonly known as the survey report, and the board must adopt the necessary resolutions of intent on or before the second Tuesday of March as prerequisites to a public hearing, which must be held on the second Tuesday of April. The purpose of the public hearing is to allow public comment on both the survey report and the proposed replenishment assessment rate. The survey report includes a recommendation for a 3.5% increase in the replenishment assessment rate for groundwater pumped or extracted for other than agricultural and municipal recreation purposes, effective on July 1, 2024. This proposed increase is subject to public notification requirements that were established through Proposition 218. This recommendation is based on projected activities needed to sustain the groundwater basin in fiscal year 2024-25, with consideration of groundwater levels and quality that is documented in the 2023 groundwater monitoring report. Under state law, there is a 120-day statute of limitations for challenging any new, increased, or extended fee or charge. Approval of this item is consistent with Strategic Plan Goal 2.1, maintain and enhance sustainability and reliability of local and regional water supplies, and Strategic Plan Goal 3, improve the district's financial stability and transparency. And I would just note, I believe you have received copies of both the survey report and the 2024 groundwater report, or 2023 groundwater monitoring report. And also, as we customarily do every March, and Mr. Hallowell will be here to share more information about this report and answer all of your burning questions as part of our annual update on this. So tonight's recommendation is to receive the 2023 groundwater monitoring report and the survey report on groundwater conditions, February 2024. And by motion, 1, adopt a resolution declaring the board's intention to continue use of replenishment assessment revenue to fund a portion of groundwater basin costs in fiscal year 2024-25, setting April 9th, 2024 at 6:00 p.m. as the date and time for a public hearing for consideration of the proposed increase to the replenishment assessment, and directing staff to mail to owners and operators of wells that would be subject to the replenishment assessment notification of the proposed increase and public hearing details. And 2, adopt a resolution extending the deadline for installation of measuring devices on certain non-metered wells. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
When will our favorite annual presenter be speaking before the board?
That will be next month in March. And I know Mike Hallowell is very much looking forward to coming as always.
Forward to seeing it. Director Sethy, any further comments?
No.
Director Weed? No.
Just looking for public comment. I don't see any hands up by our members of the public.
Okay, no public comments and hands up, and I completely support Director Sethy's comments on the presentation coming up next month.
I'll make a motion to move staff recommendation on item 5.6.
I'll second.
Motion is second. Secretary, please call the roll.
Directors Huang,
Aye.
Sethy,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
and Gunther.
Aye. Moving on to item 5.7. Organization to execute agreements to power purchase agreements, clean energy program.
Thank you, President Gunther. And for this item, we'll turn it over to our Director of Engineering and Technology, Mr. Huang.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Good evening, board members and audience. As you may recall, several years ago, the board approved a clean energy program and authorized staff to investigate various renewable energy alternatives and support the board's strategic objectives of cost effectiveness and adding value to our customers. In October 2021, the district entered into a power purchase agreement to install solar panels of 4 of the phase 1 facilities with original commercial operation date anticipated by the end of last year. In the first couple of years of the project, market forces such as potential tariffs on imported solar panels and costs associated with electrical equipment necessitated an amendment. And to that end, in October 2022, the board approved the first PPA amendment for this project. Since then, the solar developer, DG West 1 is the name of the developer, they had difficulty in maintaining the schedule due to internal organizational and contractual issues they were dealing with, in addition to recent changes in their engineering, procurement, and construction cost that they shared with the district. Because of that, they have asked the district to consider pricing changes based on their hard bid prices from their EPC contractor. But staff looked at their request, and in order to shield the district from future potential changes, which are unfavorable to the district, staff negotiated significant changes to the terms of the PPA, including reduction of buyer's early termination payment, as well as inclusion in the agreement of liquidated damages for delays beyond the extended commercial operation date. Staff has evaluated DG West 1's request and determined that it is in the best interest of the district to continue with this agreement with these additional protections that we have put in place and that the vendor, the developer, has agreed to incorporate in the second amendment. With that, I will read the summary and recommendation from staff. We have staff members, Ms. Reka Ipagunta, Project Engineering Manager, and Chris Delp is also online with Carlos Sempre, the Project Manager. The district's clean energy program will implement solar photovoltaic systems up to 6 district facilities in 2 phases. The district executed power purchase agreement for phase 1 facilities, which is the headquarters, Mayhew Reservoir, Newark Desalination Facility, and the Whitfield Reservoir sites, and phase 2 facilities, which are the Alameda Reservoir and the Dakota Reservoir sites, with DG West 1 LLC, an indirect wholly owned subsidiary of Next Era Energy Resources LLC in October 2021. Due to cost increases resulting from supply chain disruptions owing to the COVID-19 pandemic, inflation, and interest rate increases, the board authorized amendments to the phase 1 PPAs in October 2022. Due to additional changes in the progress of the program, second amendments to the PPA, the phase 1 PPAs are now required. Phase 2 PPAs are likely to be affected by cost variations and will be addressed at a future date. And we'll be sure to bring those back to the board. Board authorization of execution of the amendments will help meet the district's strategic plan goal number 1, which is maintaining and improving the cost effectiveness and value of district services. With that, I'll read staff's recommendation. By motion, authorize the general manager to execute second amendments to the power purchase agreements for phase 1 facilities, headquarters, Mayhew Reservoir, Newark Desalination Facility, and Whitfield Reservoir, with DG West 1 LLC, an indirectly wholly owned subsidiary of Next Era Energy Resources LLC, in a final form approved by the general manager and general counsel for the clean energy program, job number 10093. And I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
I'll start off with a couple of brief comments. First, I totally support moving forward on these projects and I support the staff recommendation. I think we need to be realistic as an agency as to all the supply disruptions that happened during the pandemic and also a real wholesale turnover in contractors and staffing and key personnel, you know, to work on these projects. So I understand where our primary contractors coming from too. The one comment that I have, which I brought up with Mr. Stevenson and our board president, is that I want to make sure that when we do see these installations that we are using state-of-the-art solar panels, because efficiencies have gone up since we first talked about this in 2018. Costs have come down. I recognize from staff report that we're looking at an expected ROI that's less than we thought it would be. But if we have state-of-the-art equipment, which may have longer durability and life, we may actually achieve our original goals. And I've always liked to follow the philosophy of Ronald Reagan when he was negotiating with Tip O'Neill. Half a loaf is better than none. And so I just want to get our half loaf here as soon as we can. Thank you.
I'll explain my abstention on this item. Solar, as we've seen, will soon have a negative ROI. As we've seen the pattern and the trends go down. We're talking about the closure and bankruptcy of number of solar firms as the rate of power. They can't give the power away on a sunny day in California because there's so much, something called the duck curve. We have a great abundance of power. The priority of the district should be to find 24/7 contingency power that will allow us to operate and support our operations. If we have money to invest, that's, I believe, would be the better choice in electrical power. And whether that is fuel cells such as Bloom Energy or battery backups, but that's not in this current plan. And the economics particularly are deteriorating and are soon to go negative. This is not a good a strategic business expenditure. Thank you. Maybe environmentally correct, politically correct, but it's not a rational engineering and business decision.
Mr. Akbari?
No. Board of Staff.
Well, I guess I would just say I had the pleasure of having this discussion yesterday in committee. I totally agree with Director Sethy. Half a loaf is better than nothing, right? We have invested staff time going down this path. Definitely support the concept. If we could have better and more efficient panels, that definitely would be benefit to us. I think what I want to mention is that this is a long road for ACWD. And we definitely, at least I will say, I definitely still have concern about the performance of our contractor just based on past history. However, I am also very happy to hear that yesterday to hear that we negotiated some fairly good, I will call concessions. They're probably not called concessions in the contract. I'll put in quotation mark. That actually will further strengthen the district's position in terms of making sure the contractors perform. And as far as Director Wee's comment about what happened if this doesn't pencil out, staff actually negotiated pretty nice off-ramp that's actually better than what we had before. The cost for us to walk away from this contract in the event that it doesn't make sense for the district, they actually negotiated a 50% reduction, if memory serves me right. So staff actually did a very good job to ensure that, you know, we still have the ability to walk away in the event that if this ever becomes negative for the district. So this is definitely a great project. I decided to make a comment because I think staff did a really, really good job negotiating the terms. So thank you very much.
Concur. I have the advantage of having this at committee yesterday too. And one of the things that I noticed in that actually I don't believe is in the report that I'm looking at, I'd just like to confirm was there is a May design completion date, correct?
On the schedule,
On
right?
the schedule.
Yep.
So we're looking at, no, May, that's when the scheduled design should be complete. And I'm disappointed with the contractor, but there've been a lot of issues. Director Sethy has suggested, correct. Lots of issues. They're saying May, they'll be ready, and December should have projects in place. Headquarters, Mayhew, Newark. We're not going to have Whitfield because it's a bigger project, but we'll have 3 sites up and running, which I think is important. And as I said yesterday, I do not foresee PG&E getting cheaper. It's going to get worse. And in defense of PG&E, that's okay. I mean, they are being tasked with lawsuits, you know, the fire issues. Some of that is their responsibility as a investor-owned utility versus a private utility, or if it's a private utility versus a public. However, those costs are being added, and if a municipal thinks they could do it better, I seriously doubt it.
What is the anticipated start date on Whitfield Reservoir? Because that would be the biggest reduction or contributor to our current energy costs
Next
right now.
year.
Yes, it'd be the spring of next year.
Yeah.
So it's
That'd be the commercial operation date when they need to bring it online.
still fairly close. You know, the end of this year, we should have the 3 of the sites, and Whitfield actually not very far behind.
And I have another follow-up question to Whitfield. Have we done all the community surveying in that neighborhood to get feedback from residents? Is there a plan to put arbor trees and shrubs to hide what's there, or berm? What's the plan right now?
It's a great question. It's been a long time. I believe there was some planning for some screening vegetation. We did do a lot of community outreach during the sequel process, and we got a lot of community input at that time. But I will ask to see if anybody's got a better recollection than I do about the specifics on that site. The good news is there's a fair amount of screening vegetation there already, and the panels themselves would be beyond that, sort of onto the interior of the site. But if we don't have an immediate response, I can get you some more information.
I have
Yeah.
the same questions about any installation that goes on top of the roof at Mayhew Reservoir, because you have a lot of very wealthy people that are looking down at that roof, and
These are the most handsome panels you've ever seen. I bet you they look better than just the roof of the reservoir itself.
see, I always proposed, hope I'm not getting off too much on a tangent here, but having walked the roof of Mayhew a few times, I think, I've always thought it'd be the greatest place to rent out in the East Bay Hills for big bashes and parties, because just absolute fantastic Bay Area view from San Jose to San Francisco.
I just wanted to confirm, yeah, we do plan to do a public outreach as we get closer to construction
Okay.
and make sure that, yeah, we've heard comments or concerns.
Mayhew roof ever comes up, I'll be the first to sign up. But
Okay, public comments. Tomorrow still has his hand down. Oh, okay, no public comments. We have a motion.
I
No.
will make a motion.
We have a motion correct now.
I'm actually happy to make a motion because it's 6 years since I first suggested we have a clean energy program. So I'm very excited tonight to see this finally get off the ground. And yes, I will make the motion to support the staff recommendation.
Director Sethy has made the motion for 6 years later we're getting there. And we have a second.
I'll second.
We have a second from Director Akbari. Secretary, please call the roll.
Directors Huang, aye. Sethy,
Aye.
Weed,
Same.
Akbari,
Aye.
and Gunther.
Aye.
Thank you.
I do want to compliment the staff, by the way.
Yeah.
This is not the only clean energy thing that we've worked on. We did wholesale changes to all of our buildings and lighting and air conditioning systems. I
Yeah.
want to compliment the staff on looking for every way possible to reduce our energy costs and still be looking, like Director Weed was saying, I see it in the local hazard mitigation report, that we are looking at fuel cells too for certain applications. So continue to explore every opportunity.
Yeah, I thank you for that recognition. Staff did, Ms. Rekha Pagunta is here and we have Carlos and Chris. They did a fantastic job pushing this through to this level and I'm sure they will do an even better job moving forward. Thank you.
And I would encourage us, we're doing disaster response planning to identify how we'll operate for 30 or more days without a grid.
Thank you. That concludes the agenda items. Moving forward.
Yep, that's all the action calendars, items that staff had this evening. We could move into item 6 reports.
So into item 6 reports.
Staff doesn't have any comments that we planned to make with regard to board committee reports, but be happy to address any questions or comments. Okay, then in operational reports, yeah, staff has a few remarks to make. Under item 6.2.1 rainfall report, we were asked to provide a little bit of context about, there's been a lot of activity, a lot of this wet stuff falling from the sky. We were asked to provide a little bit of context to go along with the data that we have in the report Well, how does that compare to prior years? And so with that, I'll ask Ms. Hydas to chime in.
Sure. So the rainfall to date as of this morning was just over about 14 inches, thanks to about 3.2 inches over the last 8 days from the recent storms. So we're close to or a little above average for this time of year, even though we started out a bit slow. Last year, at the end of January, we had received over 21 inches, so we're well below last year at this time, since we're a little past that January date at this point. But as compared to the 3 previous years of drought from 2020, 2021, and 2022, we're actually well ahead of where we were those years. You know, rainfall was spotty here and there. And in those years, the best case was we had around 11.4 inches at the end of January in 2022, which sounds like a lot, but 5 inches of that had come in the October storms, you might recall, and we weren't able to capture any of that. So really, we were more like 6 or 7 inches around that time, if you discount that particular storm. And the other 2 years, we were at less than 6 inches at the end of January at that time. So overall this year, it's not as wet as last year. You probably have noticed, even though it seems pretty rainy and everyone keeps passing me in the hall and saying, when's this rain going to be over? It's enough already, isn't it? But we're doing well on our local supply conditions, and groundwater levels are healthy at this point. So we'll take it. It's not over yet. And I'm happy to answer any questions about rainfall beyond that.
Thank you for that report. And I will just observe that it was like 2 weeks ago, they opened up the spillway at Oroville Dam. And I read this morning that they closed it at 10 a.m. yesterday. So there's no more water coming down, and the reservoir is 77% full. The reason they closed it is because of the they didn't get the runoff into the reservoir that they were expecting from all these storms. And from talking to someone else and having been on the Headwaters tour, we were kind of warned about this, that the watersheds are so dry, especially in the Feather River and Yuba River watersheds, that much of it is being absorbed by the ground right now. And until the ground is saturated at a certain point, there's not going to be much runoff. So hopefully we get more rain and snow. But at least the reservoir is 77% full.
Okay, and then staff also has some comments on item 6.2.9. I know that's always one that we're watching carefully and we're really interested in. But of course, if you have any other comments or questions about any of the reports, we'd be happy to address those. But for 6.2.9, our distribution system monthly hardness map, I'll let Mr. Ahrens fill us in a little bit more.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Well, if you remember, over the past summer, we saw kind of unusually low hardness levels throughout the distribution system. And over the last couple of months, staff has been indicating that those times are gone and that should be getting harder. The hardness level should be increasing. So this month, if you look at the hardness report, you'll notice significant increases that have occurred over the last couple of months. This is due to really 2 primary reasons. So the first one that we've been talking about is SFPUC, the Hetch Hetchy supply that we use at the blending facility to blend with our groundwater to reduce hardness has gone to local supply in mid-December. That means instead of getting Hetch Hetchy runoff, we're getting local reservoir supplies that go through their treatment plants. That obviously always increases hardness because that reservoir water is much harder than typical Hetch Hetchy water. Second issue going on is runoff, which has affected the hardness in the water that we get through the state water project. So again, treatment plant number 2, the hardness of the treated water really depends on the hardness of the water coming in, as the treatment process we use really doesn't reduce hardness in that process. So as the supply water gets harder, so does the treated water. So with more runoff, there's more calcium and magnesium being stirred up in the system. That especially accumulates in reservoirs. So Lake Del Valle, that supply becomes much harder than typical. And since January, they've been increasing releases from Lake Del Val to bring down the reservoir and delivering that water through the SBA. That has also increased the hardness in local reservoirs SFPUC uses. So our treated water from the treatment plants of both SFPUC as well as our own TP2 have seen increased hardness, as well as the local supply of Hetch Hetchy not being available. We anticipate this continuing in mid-March. SFPUC's plans is scheduled to go back onto their Hetch Hetchy supply. They're doing a 90-day shutdown to work on their mountain tunnel project, which is again their Hetch Hetchy's pipeline system. So the current schedule that we hope they keep is to go back on Hetch Hetchy supply in mid-March. So at that point, we'll begin getting Hetch Hetchy supplies again, which will improve blending hardness from that facility. As far as TP2, it really depends on nature and runoff and letting some of those minerals settle out of the system. As that water begins to soften up, it'll improve water quality at TP2. So another month or two, we should see increase or decreasing hardness, but in the short term, there shouldn't be much change. If you have any other questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
The good news is we're an equal opportunity extra mineral provider lately because TP2 hardness is up, a fair amount too. And so, and I'm a TP2 customer. So, we're enjoying the extra nutrition for our bodies.
I'm kind of curious as to the work on the mountain tunnel, because that is a huge project and expense. And of course, we end up footing 4% of that bill. So what are they doing exactly, and what is the project period?
They've been doing, there's a shutdown this month. I don't know the exact work. I haven't been part of those meetings. I think staff have been more involved with the technical work schedule. This year is a 90-day shutdown. And again, I think next year is a 90 or 120-day shutdown to allow for that work to continue. What specifically they're doing on this shutdown, I'm not aware. I can get that information provided.
Are they putting in a parallel tunnel, or are they rebuilding the existing tunnel?
I believe they're rehabbing their existing pipeline system.
Because that is a really steep pipeline. I've seen the photographs of when they were building it, and many lives were lost too, because it was so precarious what they were doing. I've heard, not saying it will happen, but I know that in San Francisco meetings, they've talked about the worst case scenario where the tunnel just collapses, which would be a disaster, right? Yeah. No, Hetch Hetchy water coming through the system.
Yeah, they're spending billions of dollars to make these repairs. So,
being on the Bosco board, they have identified the mountain tunnel as a vulnerable problem. The loss of the Hetch Hetchy water supply for over a year, should there be a true collapse, which is possible. Some would say probable, but because it was not part of the WISP program. So overall, $1 billion, the potential loss of the water supply for a year. However, San Francisco does have 5 to 6 years of water supply in their reservoirs within the Greater Bay Area. So it's not a loss of total San Francisco water, although the quality will be impacted negatively. So we're not at risk from that standpoint. However, it may well be, and there's been talk about shutting it down for an extended period of time and doing a major retrofit of the tunnel rather than trying to do it on a seasonally annual basis.
Interesting.
See, we have a member of the public, Mr. Nishimura has raised his hand.
Thank you, President Gunther. Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation about, that discusses all the finer points of why the hardness values are significantly increased over what we have experienced in the previous few months. I just wanted to, point out, or it should be fairly evident from the map, how effective the desal is in providing low hardness water. And I guess my comment is that, you know, as the district explores potential additions to desalination facilities to improve water supply and reliability, to not ignore the added benefit, right? The residents of Newark are enjoying nutrient-free water, while, you know, the rest of us are having to deal with water that, you know, while it's not, you know, unsafe, it is something that will cause long-term maintenance issues in plumbing. So again, just if, you know, the district is considering additional desalination facilities, or you know, as an option, that the benefit of soft water coming from the desal plant should be considered. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. We have we're not in the 200s anyway. And if I remember correctly, we have been there. That's yeah, not in the 200s. Appreciate staff. Staff presentations,
Staff has no presentations this evening.
general manager's report.
I have a whole long list, but I'll try and make it brief. First is the item that I have here on the agenda, Alameda County Science Fair Engineering Fairs Excellence in Water Research and Water Clip Student Video Contest Award Ceremony Schedule. So you might think back to last May when we last had our ceremony for the Water Clips Contest and Alameda County Science Fair winners. And the board did some thinking right after that ceremony and was thinking, well, maybe we can kind of change things up a little bit, because we don't want the students to feel like we're kind of shuffling them out, because they're kind of right in the middle of this regular board meeting with business going on. And so there was some discussion. So what staff has been thinking about is, for now, maintaining the same schedule, going ahead and having that ceremony on the same day that we normally do, along with our May board meeting, but breaking that ceremony, those ceremonies, out of our regular board meeting, holding a special board meeting in advance of our May 15 board meeting. So we have a special board meeting starting at 4:30, is what staff is thinking. Provides plenty of time to see the winners, to hear from the winners of this Water Clips contest, and also go and observe the science projects and so forth. Still be associated with ACWD here in our chambers, so that the parents, the teachers, everybody associates these ceremonies and that recognition with ACWD, but doing it separate and apart from our business meeting that same day. So that's what staff is proposing to do. We didn't want to send you all meeting invites or anything until I at least sort of let you know what we're planning. And certainly if there's great concern with that, we'd love to hear about it. We can see how it goes this year and kind of adjust if we don't think it worked well enough, but that's what staff is planning to do. Okay, so the next up on my list is, you may or may not have received, I know President Gunther received a notice that the LAFCO, the Local Agency Formation Commission of Alameda County, has an upcoming seat that's to be an upcoming election for one of the seats on the commission. This is the Enterprise Special District seat, and we're an Enterprise Special District. So they've sent us a notice to say, just so you know, that we're going to have this election. President Gunther will be casting our vote unless he designates someone else to do that. It'll be in May. This is not a vacant seat currently. The incumbent, Ralph Johnson, of, I think, Castro Valley Sanitary, is seeking re-election. But it's available should someone want to run for that seat, because we are eligible. You all are eligible to run for that seat. If you do want to run for that seat, we would ask that you let me know so that I can get an agenda. In order to be nominated officially, you have to have a resolution from your board. So if you would like to be nominated for that election, please let me know. I'd like to know by March 4th, so we can get it on the agenda for the following board meeting. That would be great. We've got a little bit of time, but let me know. Okay, finally for me, we'll have one after this. I was recently asked about the status of the Niles Canyon Trail project. You remember this is going back several years too, where this board signaled support for the Niles Canyon Trail project, which really was sort of the moral support behind that project in large part was Supervisor Valle. And now he's since passed. So the question was, what's happening with that project? And so, so I reached out to Alameda County, who is this sort of project manager, and learned that the project is actually still moving forward. They're moving through they've done a lot of planning work in the past, and then it kind of cooled off a little bit, but they still have been doing some planning work and the early parts of environmental review. They indicated to me that they're planning on holding a partner meeting with a number of interested agencies and others, and that would be within the next few weeks. ACWD will be at the table at this partner meeting and see what's going on. I did signal that, hey, our board has indicated in the past we're supportive of this and we're interested in understanding what we can do to support. I think a key issue with the project as it stands right now is there's not been funding identified. And through the planning process, as of a couple of years ago, they were estimating on the order of 150 million for completion of the trail. My guess is that'll go up significantly when all things are said and done, but that seems to be probably sort of the big cloud hanging over things right now is the lack of funding. So I just wanted to provide what I knew about that project, and I appreciate the question and the request to provide an update.
Can I add to that report?
Of course.
So the final EIR is out right now for public review. There is a website set up for the Niles Canyon Trail project. I don't recall it straight off my head, but initially we were asked, along with SFPUC and East Bay Regional Park District, to contribute toward the initial preliminary study. And so we made a commitment of 50,000. Turns out nobody got a bill.
They never asked us for the money. We said, we've got it, board approved it, but it's never been sent. But they still know about it.
I had a conversation with Chris Smiley, who went and looked at, he was working for Richard Valle, so he came back with a report. So the current funding is coming from Alameda County and City of Fremont, Measure B. And so what I have asked Mr. Stevenson to do in that partner meeting is I actually don't find the funding, this is me personally, to be all that daunting. Because first of all, it was really a lot of effort on the part of ACWD that made this happen, and quite some time back. But we got Niles Canyon approved as a state scenic highway to get all the fuel trucks off Niles Canyon Road that were coming through, and other major trucks. So that made the canyon a lot safer. And since it is a state scenic highway, and we have access to state park funds under Secretary Crowfoot. So that's one source of funding, and maybe it's a phased in type of thing. We also have a proposition that Aqua's trying to work on right now for fall ballot, or maybe next year, where they are setting aside monies for these kind of projects. And lastly, there are federal opportunities with Congressman Swalwell for bringing in grants or an earmark or something like that. And he's done a number of these earmarks for the Tri-Valley area. So I think it's just putting good minds together to explore all the funding opportunities that are out there. There's some existing bonds that, you know, that have money available too. So we just need to get the project finalized. One thing I will note, which I found interesting in the public feedback, because I've been following this, is that the trail was supposed to end on Foothill Road coming into the town of Sonoma. But all the residents who live on that road, every single one protested. They don't want all the cyclists and people walking straight through their front yards. So they've come up with an alternate route, which is to end on the other side of Highway 84 at the, I think it's called the Western States Nursery, something like that. It's at the nursery going, and then it would lead into the Water Temple area. To me, that makes a lot more sense. But I don't know the design details of how that would happen. Anyway, tell everybody to keep an open mind on funding.
When we offered the $50,000, their request was 25, we doubled it. We put in as part of that request that they maintain the integrity of the Niles Canyon Aqueduct, which would be a contingency water supply service should we lose South Bay Aqueduct and water coming down off Mission Pass. So I would encourage us to ask in our discussions, continue to remind them that the Niles Canyon Aqueduct is of concern, is of interest to us, and determine this current status of the Niles Canyon Aqueduct with the improvements on Route 84, because at the one sharp bend where it used to be visible, this concrete block, but I recall water coming out of it when it was operational, spouting out in the early 90s, 1990s. Hopefully that's not been compromised.
Yeah, I think in that part of the canyon, I think the trail is on the opposite side of Highway 84. But I do know that the current plan shows, some overlap between the trail and the aqueduct, but they were considering using the aqueduct itself as a big wide sidewalk. So it is integrated into the current plan. And I did neglect to mention that this board wasn't just interested in throwing money at the project. The board's interest included everything in Niles Canyon, what's happening, protection of water quality, of course, the infrastructure that's already in Niles Canyon. So our interests were fairly varied. And so that's one reason why this board signaled they wanted to be involved in the process.
Yeah, as I understand, the trail right away is 12 to 14 feet. And the width of the aqueduct is probably 7 feet at most.
It's true. I actually drove through Niles Canyon this afternoon. Haven't been through it a little bit, and noticed a significant amount of work that's been done. I think last year, one of the things about last year's rains is it tested us. And so there has been, I believe, some benefit to that, to the project. And a lot of the restoration work has already been done, certainly on the Union Pacific side. I think they want to keep the ACE trains moving and not moving in the creek, which is useful. They almost did last year, a couple times.
Occasional mudslide.
I do think when I drove through the section that Director Reed was talking about, with the construction, I don't believe they got into it. I do believe it's still there. On the EP side, I was able to see a small portion from the road, but I also don't think they've gotten into it over there as well. So I love the aqueduct. the value of, it certainly is a conduit, it's there, plumbed, interesting. There is a section missing. Replaceable. But I do still support us with this, and I think they've gotten some valuable lessons last year to bring them to understand this is what they're going to be up against with the canyon, because it does tend to slide. So far, so good this year.
Well, its contribution to our local heritage is reflected in the fact that the new tattoo parlor in Niles is the secret sidewalk tattoo.
All right, and the next general manager's report
Thank
will
you.
be?
Thank you for that subtle hint, Mr. Miyake. Yeah, didn't intend for a ton of discussion, just we had a late request to add that information. So we have one last general manager's request, and that is from Mr. Awoke about an upcoming informational meeting for one of our big capital projects.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Stevenson. So I wanted to inform the board about an upcoming public informational meeting for the Driscoll Road main renewal project. The board approved the construction contract last month, so we are ready to move forward with the construction. The meeting date is on Wednesday, February 21st, 2024. The meeting time is starting at 6 p.m. We plan to end around 7 p.m. We begin the presentation at 6 p.m. and followed by a Q&A session. The location for the meeting will be at the library of the Hopkins Middle School. I think it's building number H101. And the address is 600 Driscoll Road, Fremont, zip code 9453, I believe 8, but I may have gotten that wrong. So please let me know if you plan to attend, so we can, notice and plan accordingly. And also, if you have any questions, please reach out to me.
Yeah, and Mr. Awoke is planning to send the board some specifics so that you all can review it and plan accordingly and respond with any thoughts you have about your own participation.
Correct.
I plan on attending.
Okay.
I'll plan on attending.
Okay. Well, that completes our general manager's reports.
Okay, no further general managers reports.
That's all we have this
We'll
evening.
Move on then.
If you want, we can make
director-
stuff up, but that's all we had prepared.
We'll move on to director's comments regarding meetings and agenda items. And I think we'll take Director Sethy first if he's ready about Las Pesqueros.
Okay, so last month I did give a report, although it wasn't on the agenda. Mr. Wunderlich also gave a report. I will just say our next board meeting is next Wednesday at Zone 7, beginning at 9:30 a.m. We usually end around noontime. And we've all been encouraged to let our boards and staffs know that they are welcome to attend as observers. We do have regular observers from some water districts, but we kind of lack the participation. And so we were all kind of encouraged by our executive director. Make sure people know, you don't need a special invitation. If you want to show up, please come on and you'll learn a whole lot there. Okay, so I'll go first with South Bay Engineers Club meeting. We had a very good 2-hour session with an attorney from Perkin Boys, one of the law firms in San Francisco, like Hanson Bridget, from their real estate specialist attorney. And I gave one copy of the materials to Mr. Stevenson in case anybody wants to review them, another to Mr. Miyake. But essentially, we were covering the California Subdivision Map Act and land use planning legislation updates for 2023. And I know Director Reed has some comments on things here, but as I noted, in the last legislative session, there were 65 new land use and housing bills introduced. That's on top of other bills in past legislative years. So the state has essentially taken over city councils and planning commissions, and everybody's recognizing it. And it has become a very complex job to be a council member or planning commissioner, because you almost have to be an attorney to sort through all the complexities and overlapping laws that there are out there right now. I want to focus on one area which to me ties in directly with our district here, because there's a lot of material covered session. But in the local government committee for Aqua, we are talking about trying to sort out all the issues on ADUs. And it's a issue for both water and sanitary districts, or combination. And one of the more interesting pieces of legislation that passed, signed by the governor this last year, was AB 1033, which allows any residential property to create a condominium overlay on that property and create a brand new assessor's parcel number for that ADU. It can be multiple ADUs too, if the property is large enough to accommodate it. And that APN is assigned separate property taxes from the base homeowner. So the reason this was done is to create the saleability of ADUs. And this creates a very interesting situation for agencies like our own, because now you've got a separate property tax owner who probably is going to get an annual sanitary bill. And instead of connecting through the original homeowner for a water connection, we probably have to have a separately assigned meter. And of course, it's complicated from the homeowner standpoint too, because they have to meet all of the conditions and covenants of their current mortgage if they have one, any secondary liens on the property. They have to maintain a certain equity to debt ratio in their real estate holding. So it's more ideal for people that have owned their property free and clear. And, but anyway, it's an interesting wrinkle, and the saleability of ADUs is going to create a substantially lower priced market for people to acquire property and move into their own units. And right now, you can build something up to 1,200, 1,600 square feet. It's almost like building another home. So I think that's something we should pay attention to. And I'm going to be directly working on this in the Aqua Local Government Committee, beginning in just a couple of weeks. I want to bring up one other thing here, not on the agenda, but Director Weed and I attended the final public meeting of the Tri-City Multi-Jurisdictional Local Hazard Mitigation Plan at the Fremont Main Library on Wednesday, January 24th. Our staff was there to present. Jake was there to present for our district, but each agency had their own representative. And it was an excellent presentation. As a citizen in our community, I differ greatly with the way Newark is headed in terms of building right out into the bay. And I think they're at high risk for sea level rise. They're not taking the hazard mitigation plan seriously in my mind. They many of these properties already have a high water table. Here's my request. On the list of ACWD actions, everything says it's a 2022 action and everything gets a check mark. But what I think our board needs, and there's so many action items here. Yeah, there's so many action items under ACWD, under different sections of this plan, that I think we need some kind of schedule that shows the time horizon for getting each one of these things done and in place. It was never clear to me in the community presentation what has been done, what hasn't been done. It's going to be done in the next year, 5 years from now. And so I think a comprehensive overview of what ACWD's plan is would be very helpful. I didn't discuss this with Director Weed, but I'd welcome his thoughts too. So those are my reports. Thank you. Oh, and I will not be here next month for our board meeting. I'm going on a Water Education Foundation 3-day trip on the lower Colorado River tour, leaving the day before. So 4 days. Should be quite a learning experience. That was approved last month, board agenda.
Okay. Thank you. South Bay Engineers Club meeting, which I attended along with Dr. Sethy. Matthew Gray has been an annual speaker at this group on the Subdivision Map Act and land use laws. So and there's an excellent packet, which both of us independently made copies of to share with the staff. And I encourage anyone who's interested in that type of topic. Some extraordinary cases here. The ADUs, of course, are a change in policy and something we as a water district will have to learn how to either sub-meter or meter. There are some districts that don't want to go over 200 customers, and there's Las Prisma Hills, because that becomes a major water supplier and they have to do additional reports. So do they consider the ADU to be a sub-meter, or definitely don't make them a master meter service? On the meeting of the hazard mitigation plan, which ACWD is participating, there's some elements of that that we should be on top of. The first is the definition of what is the official sea level rise. They're going to quantify it as 2 meters by 2100. Built a conveyance project with the EIR has had at 10.2 feet in 100 years. About 2 meters by 2100. That exceeds our current levels and exceeds FEMA's criteria. I find that curious is, will this rely on FEMA or will it rely on a new standard that will be developed within the communities under this process? And the FEMA is basically flood control issues and around the country, and they have a much broader view and concern. But when we're looking at 7 to 10 feet, there are 2 websites, one by the NOAA and the other by Climate Challenge, which will give you a very graphic view of what happens on a parcel basis. You can zoom in, showing what the impact is going to be as the sea level comes up and where the shoreline is. I recall when the city of Fremont would not work with BCDC in meeting their criteria requirement of identifying a 100-foot strip around the bay. BCDC developed their shoreline from southern border of Union City with Mark Green as mayor to Emeryville, where there was a gap. Newark relies on Fremont to determine where the shoreline is, although I did suggest from their staff that Newark should work with BCDC, to establish a shoreline on their western boundary, and that puts Fremont in the bay. The mission fault is not reflected in the current FEMA mapping and guidelines, which appear to be over 40 years old, behind the times. So we're using an archaic basis with this hazardous mitigation study, and that may also impact the sea level issues when they get into developing the project. Clearly, the mission fault is the most dangerous fault by far in our area, and it's been well documented in a number of documents. It also is the report I thought was weak on the area of landslides. You know, the Mission Peak is sliding. We've had to rebuild 680. South Bay Aqueduct has been challenged and had some breaks. And there have been some detailed studies of showing where the fault activity is, although it was pulled from a report that was commissioned by the city of Fremont, as it was noted by the city attorney that would be responsible. The city would now have a responsibility to put on the deeds of the various properties that they were in an identified high-risk landslide area. In lieu of that, they are sent a letter with a nondescript statement saying you may be in a high-risk landslide area, even though they have a map which gives them the detail, and not informing the public that they haven't. In fact, there was at least one councilwoman who wished to have the landslide designations removed because she was worried about the impact on her home value. The next point is, earlier this evening, we adopted a resolution to purchase media for the PFAS treatment. Within the last few days, EPA has issued a finding that PFAS are hazardous, and some curious language on how to deal with RCLA, particularly in discharge areas. So some unique and innovative findings on the part of EPA in this case, but it opens the question, and I encourage legal counsel to get involved in this. What is the RCLA requirements for the disposal of the ion exchange media, which is now hazardous, toxic, or potentially toxic substance?
Yeah,
Under RCLA, it's difficult to transfer that to a third party.
Yeah, staff and general counsel are aware of that. We're evaluating that, and we'll be back at least to a committee with some additional information. We don't have all the answers tonight, but we're definitely very aware.
Okay. I believe that when they've provided everyone an opinion piece by ASCE that identifies water treatment, and particularly recycled water, as a de novo generator of PFAS, which may create a different category than the water industry has currently been willing to accept today. And we could be so we may have that pogo moment where we have met the enemy. Thank you.
I would quickly like to add something to my request. I forgot what I was thinking about that evening. The program manager was talking about, as I asked a number of questions. So we found out that FEMA will not pay for stockpiling equipment that you're going to need after a major disaster. I was always thinking that we could, but that's a no-no. But a lot of the planning that we're doing is CIP related, where we can access FEMA brick money. And so as part of that timeline for what we're looking through, especially on projects like Driscoll Road, Niles Alvarado, the spines of our system, these are major seismic improvements to ensure the integrity and health of our distribution system. So I'm hoping that when we get this overview of trying to fulfill all these objectives, we also are looking at where we get the funding from the federal government. I mean, they're handing it out. Let's go grab it. I mean, we owe this to our ratepayers.
We have a grants team. We take our entire CIP, including everything that's been listed in that Tri-City Hazard Mitigation Plan. And we actively seek grant funding for all of those types of items. We have applied for many. As it stands right now, we have a good shot at the Alvarado Niles Phase 2 pipeline, which is important. It's very expensive, and that is a pre-hazard mitigation. Or at least big parts of that project are pre-hazard mitigations. And so this is definitely something that we do.
Thank you. And finally, this is a personal experience. I cannot purchase crushed concrete because PG&E is buying up everything on the lots for their, to bury their power lines. So if we, for the need for fill, I'm not sure what our experience has been in trying to find adequate supplies for backfill.
Hey, we own a
Incredibly
bunch
short
of old
supply.
quarry pits.
You may want to go into operation, or we may want to be friends with the, what, over Dublin San Ramon, where there's an extraordinary pile of crushed concrete along 680, not far from where a recycled water pilot project is being proposed. So, thank you.
Okay, with that, no further director comments or agenda items. I see no closed sessions this evening. I think we're ready for adjournment.
That
Good
sounds
job, President Gunther.
right. 8:36.
All right, Chuck.
I will